folks. Welcome to Walking on the Weene Side, part of It Matters Radio. And today my guest is Michael Rothenberg. And Michael is a poet. He's been a poet a long time. As you can see from his beard, he and I are contemporaries. He's been very involved in helping to found something called 100,000 Poets for Change. And he's a co-founder of Poets in Need, a nonprofit that helps poets in crisis. And he edits and publishes the online literary magazine bigbridge.org. And Michael has been involved in a very interesting project of late, where he is sharing his poetry on stage with improvisationalized music. The musicians come and they play along with you. Is that right, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, they play, I read along, I read, they play along. We don't know exactly what's going to happen and when and first, and we kind of try to get into a groove and make it work.
And there's a tradition of doing this, isn't there?
I think, yeah, certainly. I mean, there's people like Amiri Baraka who've done it. There was Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Jack Kerouac. It goes much much further than that. I mean, there's traditions of spoken word and music going back to the beginning of time, I suppose, and you find the traditions in churches. I mean, the whole language, call, response, music, words. Mm-hmm. So this is a kind of continuation of this. People like to point at the beat tradition because it's something that's more current and identifiable.
Yeah. Now you got a grant to do this.
Yeah, back in 2008, I think it was. The Creative Work Fund gave Terry Carrion and David Meltzer and I a grant to travel around the country, mm-hmm. doing performances without rehearsals, or very little rehearsal, with groups in LA. We worked with many of the musicians in Bonnie Raitt's band. We went to the Albuquerque and performed with a percussion ensemble. New Orleans, we performed with the Dirty Dozen Brass Band. We went up to D.C., performed with a free jazz band, and we went on to Toronto, Chicago, St. Louis, mm-hmm. and performed. We changed our set depending on how we felt when we got where we were going. So we went and we did this for 2 months, and as a part of that grant, we also had workshops and discussions to talk about the tradition of poetry, music, art, and activism, the troubadour tradition.
Troubadour, there's a great word, the troubadour tradition. And now you're doing more of it. And,
yes.
What are some of your most recent visits? Where some of the musicians you've worked with in places?
Well, when I moved to Tallahassee from California about a year and a half ago, and I hooked up with a bunch of musicians here in Tallahassee. There's a great town for musicians. The school here at Florida State has a fantastic music department, and FAMU, and so there's great musicians around. And I hooked up with Michael Backen, who's a drummer and head of the World Music Ensembles. Brian Hall teaches at FAMU, great bass player. Joel Johnson, also at FAMU, guitar player. And Kip Ritchie, playing handpan, and Bradley White with the didgeridoo, and Vivian Astorzaga playing piccolo and flute. Mm-hmm. And we kind of all got together, and it seemed to evolve like that. And then Bob Malone, who is a friend of mine for 25 years, we wrote songs together, back in California when I was living there, and we've done some music, poetry, and performance. We did a couple shows on that Grant tour together and other places, and he's now touring with John Fogerty and just finished a session with Ringo Starr. He's played with Bruce Springsteen and Alan Toussaint, and he came out to Tallahassee for a show that I wanted to put on called the Bob Malone, Michael Rothenberg, and the Eco Sound Ensemble.
Now, who comes to these shows? What is your audience like?
Very mixed, very interesting. It was interesting. I thought there'd be a lot of poets. There were maybe 20% of them were poets. Mm-hmm. Maybe 50% of the audience were people who came to hear music, and maybe the rest were curiosity seekers. What in the world is this going to be? Mm-hmm. And that was kind of interesting, because people came who didn't have any idea what they were going to even see or what to expect. It's very hard to explain to them. They're not. So it was really, really interesting. We had standing room only. There was over 100 people came, and
cool.
We did our set from the one that you've heard already, the Eco Sound Ensemble with Bob Malone. And then Bob Malone took a couple of the musicians, Michael Backen and Brian Hall, and performed and Joel Johnson, and performed a set of his music, because Bob's a great piano player and songwriter, and he's had quite a few CDs. So the show was split between the Eco Sound Ensemble with Bob, and then some of those musicians went to work with Bob individually on his performance.
Now, when you got up on stage, the musicians that you had behind you when you were going to do your poetry, they hadn't heard your poem. They didn't know the poem you were going to write.
Not really. I mean, I changed things. I mean, we had done one or two shows with just a part of the ensemble earlier in the year, and they got an idea, but I didn't even tell them when I switched pieces that I was going to do. Mm-hmm. In fact, you'll see in the recordings, I'll be standing on the stage at the end of a song or beginning of a poem, and I'll be sort of going, okay, this is a scary poem. It'll be on a boat, and it takes place in Italy. Or why don't we try a Latin beat, and how about a little vamp of the Mickey Mouse Club song? And they go, okay, and they would do it. And when they got the rhythm going, and I'd find my place, I'd get in there, and they'd listen, and I'd listen. And so the magic of this is listening to each other.
It's real. It's the true art of jamming, because you have to listen to the other person and play off of them.
Entirely. And then, I mean, I could signal them, like, increase, let's go faster, or slower, or I'm coming to an end. Mm-hmm. But then there was times when they would see the light, and they'd be just charging along. Mm-hmm. And I'd just say, okay, I'm stepping back for this. You guys do it. And they would do a jam, and it was, I love that. I love not knowing what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I like the idea that I'm going up there, and it's going to be a big surprise. What's going to happen? What kind of melody? I mean, for me, my only goal is that it's as exciting and entertaining to me and the musicians and to the audience, and that they're caught in the surprise. And they know that, in a way, they know. I mean, a lot of them said, "You mean you never did this together at all?" And we're saying, no. And it's great.
And you're going to be doing more of it, I take it. I mean, you obviously you're going to be doing some more of these.
We'll be doing a show. February 10th for something called Opening Nights, a Saturday matinee of the arts, which is a big deal in Tallahassee. We're going to probably shape the performance towards youth because it's an open thing for all ages, and maybe sometimes my work is a little bit too edgy, and so I'm hoping we're going to work on this piece called Once Upon a Mountain, which is a kind of children's poem. Kind of maybe it'll be like Peter and the Wolf or something like that.
Uh-huh.
We'll get different instruments representing different characters. We'll see. I don't even know, but that's what I think we're going to do. And then on April 15th, we're going to be doing Word of South, which is a word music and poetry and music, a kind of show. I think they're having Suzanne Vega is coming to do that show, and we're going to be one of the actors, the acts performing there, and we'll be performing with that whole band without Bob. Unfortunately, Bob is back in California now.
And we're going to, speaking of back, we're going to be back in just a moment, folks. Welcome back, folks, to Walking on the Weene Side. Michael, I have to tell you, it really sounds like you guys are having fun doing these performances. I wish I could join you in Tallahassee for one.
It is fun. I mean, it's addictive. I mean, I have to be really careful to make sure to get off stage. In fact, I think I mentioned that during the show. I said, look, my time is up. I've got to go, but I hate to go because it's a constant surprise of what's going to happen, and that's so much fun. And I mean, sometimes I have to find myself singing the lines to my poem, because I hear a melody about the same time as the line of poetry, and I just think I want to sing it like that. So I
Yeah.
do. So sometimes I just break out into song.
I was going to
So
say that the music that the musicians are playing is going to affect the way you're reading.
yes,
And
the
I was
temp. The,
I
yeah.
was wondering if we could get you at this point to read one of the poems, perhaps a short one that you have done to music or done with music, or maybe one that you're hoping to next time. And let's get a feel for some of this poetry.
Well, here's one. Then this is kind of fairly conventional. The yeah, here's one that we just did called "There Will Be Slaves," and what I found is, this is was written for a book. It's in a book. Like, there's my book, Wake Up and Dream, and just out from Mad Hat Press. And I found that I heard an energy building towards the end of a verse, so I paused and let them build. And because it was building, I sped up into the second verse. So my way of reading changes with what I see happening and the emotional thing that I see them going through. Sometimes I'm blind to that. So here it is. There will be slaves. There will be queens, presidents, laureates, and slaves. Cicada and a calamity of brass bells in a chorus at 2 a.m. when the shadows stretch and bend across the heavy doors of the spirit-swollen church. Poets from Paris, Sacramento, and Kuala Lumpur will begin a serenade, take on a puppet Broadway, a stone choreography in the piazza, while children in pajamas crawl out on moonlit balconies, watch through curtains of night-drying laundry, dripping blouses, and large pink underwear, the dance and fermentation of the spoken word. There will be a quake, a mutant rhyme, a seagull cry, then change will come. A breeze from the broad blue Tyrrhenian Sea, the resurrection of green with every lava-buried breath, disabling Kabul and utopian Abrachi. It will come, the change. And then the children will go back to bed. The police will never say a word. The clock will unwind, and all the poets of the world will march in celebration of another broken law, another pantomime of insurrection.
Very nice poem, and clearly in the best of the beat tradition.
Thank you. And so here there's this line, it will come, the change. I found myself going, it will come. It will come. Because that was what was going on in the music. The change. It will come.
Was changing you.
So and in the end, I actually, as a kind of tag, I tagged it with "It will come, the change," because it seemed right for it musically to add a tag there. So the music shaped how I actually delivered it.
Do you find that as you work with these musicians over time doing this, let me ask it this way, do they find that you are moving them to think about their music differently?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's a total collaboration. The one thing I love about these musicians is that I know they're learning too, and they're humble about it. They're going, look, improvisation, you always learn if you're improvising. That's, and you're always sharpening up, and you're always developing your chops. And like Bob Malone, like he says, like when I do my pieces, I know how they go. So I don't. It's not always a surprise. And so here, I really have to work and use my whole everything, all of my skills, all of my thinking. I have to think. I have to discover, plan, and be surprised. And if you watch the video, you can see that there's um, there's times when the musicians are just sort of like smiling because they've just come onto something that they didn't expect.
Have you gone beyond the oral arts to other kind of arts in the process? I give you an example.
On the what?
Other kinds of art. Like a year ago or so, I went to a celebration of Langston Hughes, and a painter had come to the people who were doing this wonderful. It was reading and music, but it was rehearsed music. It wasn't. And this painter had said, "Hey, can I come and set up my easel over to the side and paint
Right.
while you're performing?"
Right.
And then I believe she actually donated the painting to be sold off to benefit the organization that was involved. Have you ever tried? Have you tried any of that?
I've never done that. In fact, I just saw that being done in New Orleans. I went to see a show of spoken word music, and they had a painter there, and they had a dancer on the stage. So they had a band, painter, a dancer, and then the main poet.
Cool.
It was great. It was great. It was very interesting, and it was quite a long show, and it was surprisingly. He never got tired of it, which a long poetry reading you could get tired of.
Yeah, I find that listening to poetry requires a lot more processing because you have to constantly be thinking about meanings and things, even though you're trying not to and just allow yourself to be enveloped. You at the same time you have to think about the symbolism. Whereas when you're listening to music, you don't have to worry, and so it's all different kinds of processing that's going on with all of those things, and I think that's part of the fun of it.
I think that's an interesting thing that you're talking about because one of the things is I'm tired of worrying about what does it mean. Yeah, I guess you could analyze my poem and you could pay attention to every single word, and there are some people who feel that that's essential. But for me, I don't really care if you get all of the words or not. As long as you feel like energized and curious, and maybe you even want to dance during the reading. And we had people dancing during the reading. Like the audience got up because the groove was so great. And here I am reading a poem, and they're dancing while the music's playing. That to me is more important than understanding, quote, every single word. It takes away the certain kind of, don't get me wrong, it takes away a certain kind of self, I don't know, it's kind of like, it's not that important, like relax already, know.
It's self-important. The solipsistic quality of the art is gone, and that doesn't
mean it becomes less sacred.
No,
it doesn't mean that at all. It is more sacred because the ego is reduced at a level to where it's a give and take, and and you as the audience are witnessing a sharing. And that has a very, very spiritual component, and it has a very deep component. And you can't just say any words. I mean, it must be the right words you're not paying attention to.
Very well put.
Right?
Exactly. Well, actually, one of the things you were saying about the sacred, and it occurs to me that the very thing that makes the art sacred is that kind of participatory, experiential quality, rather than the let's worry about this word. I think that's one of the things that has gone so wrong in a lot of religion in America. People are so worried about interpreting every word of the Bible as if somehow or other, if I don't know its Armenian or its Sanskrit roots or something, that somehow I haven't quite got the word of God. And meanwhile, the messages are so beautiful, especially this time of year when we're talking about the Christmas
There's definitely
story.
an ecstatic aspect to religion, and this celebrates the ecstatic aspect of poetry and the art of poetry and the magic of poetry. I hope that it does. That's my goal, is to so that you are enjoying this. You're in celebration, and also talking about not mean words mean what they mean. I mean, I didn't invent that. I mean, scat is a good example of sounds
we'll be right back to talk a little about scat.
Affair by Kenneth Weene. The laundry goes undone while you and I make love. Tomorrow I will sort towels and pair socks that have no mates. Life is lonely, then you come. Too bad you have to leave. Can't your family do without? The dog will surely miss you. She cries when you have left again. She paws the door to let you in and cannot understand that you have other scents that draw you hence. Scents that fill the silent desert air. She licks away my tears.
You stopped instead, I caught your smile. I'm just no good, no good. It's too late to dream of
my coffee queen. Where have you been?
all of the things we said. Where does the time all go?
I'm going to do you guys a little John party, so if you like it, please give it a like, share, subscribe.
Welcome back to Walking on the Weene Side. And I've been talking with poet Michael Rothenberg. And Michael, we were just talking about scat, which of course is the musical use of voice in jazz.
Right. They're verbal vocalizations. They're not necessarily words.
Right.
But they have a meaning to you as you listen to them. And the reason they have a meaning to you, the way that you know they have a meaning to you is because you like to hear it. That's, to me, you know what I mean?
The whole point of any art is generating reaction in the audience.
And there are groups that have done complete sound poems. I mean, this has been done, and it continues to be done, and so that's an aspect that I'm not doing, but I'm embracing that to a degree, because I'm basically saying it's not that important that you don't understand, as long as you're in the groove, feeling it, and you walk away engaged. That's, to me, is enough. So that way I think it connects with things like scat and its sound poems.
Yeah, I have a monthly open mic here in Phoenix that I host, and we're very fortunate. We have a wonderful stage at the theater downtown, the State Theater Center, the Herberger Theater, and they let us do it there. And occasionally I'll get a musician in, and they'll be playing this wonderful music, and I'm been trying to figure out, how do I get the audience to get up and go, this big stage there, dance, people, dance.
Well, and then I said to the band before, I said, look, I don't know. All I can tell you is that the first time I ever saw this happen was when we were performing with the Dirty Dozen Brass Band. They had such a groove going that people couldn't help but get up and dance. And I was watching, I'm going, oh my God, a poetry reading with people dancing because the spirit took them. And so I said to the band before this show we did recently, I said, I will know we've fully accomplished what we're after if the audience gets up and dances. And they did. So I mean, a lot has to do with your rhythm section, right?
Oh yeah.
A lot has to do with your getting your. I mean, we had great players. I mean, they just took it away. I mean, there were times when I just had to stop reading and just let it go.
Now, do you know what kind of instrumentation you're going to have at any, like when you go, like you mentioned at one point, one of the people you had playing with you at one point was a didge player.
Right.
Did you know you were going to have a didge player?
Yes.
Did
you? I mean, I got the didge play. I mean, I was introduced to these people. I said, well, that'd be cool. Let's have a didge. In fact, Bob Malone, I think it may have been the first time he played with the didge, and he was going like, okay. I don't know how to play exactly with the didge, but I'll try. And it all fell in naturally. No, I guess for me, what I am looking for, I think, because I'm very inarticulate about this. I'm not a musician, but rhythm is important, but so is color, and so is dimension. So things like flute and guitar, piano, they create color and shape and different harmonics that I can work around, and they touch different parts of me emotionally, so and I think it adds I don't want to say distraction, but it keeps the audience from fixating on the one doom, So I do try to lean that with, like, the show we have in January 10th. We're going to have a clarinet, a flute, didgeridoo, handpan, congas, timbales, and bass. So we're gonna have like the clarinet and the flute will be able to do some, different dimensional stuff, and the bass will be able to get good rhythm with the drums, and so it's gonna. I felt that it was important to add, like, the last instrument I added was the clarinet, because I just felt like I needed one more sound.
Well, I played the clarinet as a kid. And, of course, I love klezmer. And, of course, the minute you mention clarinet and poetry, I'm wailing in my head.
No, that's a very, very good example. So I think, that's, I don't know what I'm going to have. I do kind of encourage certain things, but how they actually work, I know nothing about that.
Uh-huh.
I don't know anything about it. It's music. I don't, it's like, it's magic. I mean, there was one guy at the concert going like, well, Bob was going like, what key is your handpan in? And they started talking about F sharps and B flats and this and that. And I turned to the audience and I said, this is like chemistry to me. I have no idea what they're talking about here. So, keys, chords, I don't know.
You don't know because you only perform. Well, hopefully you're performing only at one note at a time. If your voice is more like mine, you might be playing 2 or 3 notes at a time.
Right. I have no idea what I'm doing. So, very, very fun.
But I love the idea. And do you find that having started doing more and more of this collaborative process with music and your poetry, do you find it's changing the poetry you're writing now?
It's a good question. No. What I do is I write a lot. I look for poems that I think that I write what I write, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I don't write what I think is going to get published in a magazine. I don't write what I think is going to be performable. I just write whatever it's inside of me, and it goes down.
Of course.
And then I go through my work and I select ones that I think will lend themselves to a performance with music.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't. And now it could be affecting me, and I just don't know it. I mean, everything affects us.
Right.
So
your friends and family haven't said, "Hey, Michael, your poetry has changed."
No, actually, the pieces I performed the other night, "Angels Sleep in Peace," I wrote in 1995, and it has nothing to do with us. Also in 1993, I wrote "There Will Be Slaves" 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The Disneyland and the Cops I wrote this past year. So they're coming from all times in my life, and so different times in my life and different. I mean, I've been through different stylistic transitions. I think I have always had two zones I go into as a writer. Maybe one more quote spoken word, and the other more meditative and contemplative.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I go from contemplative to more of a spoken word, oral kind of piece. And so something like what I just read you, though, is I consider it to be contemplative by my standards. And other pieces that I read in the show were definitely things that were, story and more external.
I think it's fascinating, and I'm really glad that you came on Walking on the Weene Side to share it. Now, folks, you want to look for Michael Rothenberg, Rothenberg. I believe there's at least a couple of YouTube of your performing. And you also want to look for bigbridge.org, which is his literary magazine online. And, of course, try and support 100,000 Poets for Change. And that one is www.100tpc.org. And also, he is a co-founder of the Poets in Need organization, which helps poets. And Michael, thanks so much for joining us today on Walking on the Weene Side.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed it.